Hello and welcome to Module 8. Oh my goodness, Module 8 for MFA 509Q1011. Now, this is the week of Thanksgiving, so I checked with the school and they got direction from the school. We do have Module 8, so we don't get this week off. That's the bad news. The good news is that the only thing that we have this week is a discussion board. Woo! There are some readings to do and some things to consider and such like that. However, so we don't have another writing assignment. We have just the discussion board. So the work is not as heavy this week, which is good. So just there is that thing. And we just need to make sure that the deadline for turning in your discussion is by the following Sunday, okay? Often they have the discussions due on Thursday just so we get a chance to respond to people, but this one is due on Friday. All right, so let's get right to it. Okay, so this week is on strategies for writers. So we've looked at all sorts of different things during this course, and now we have to figure out strategies. Strategies, basically, how are we going to, as we've taken all this information and figured out, how stories are created, and how they're constructed and the different elements they include. How do we, as a strategy for a writer, how are we going to then create our own stuff? And how we do that is being able to look at what is employed by other writers. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So that's really what the goal is for this particular week. So let's move on. Boom, 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 boom. The module overview is basically, go ahead and read through this, but I want to just highlight on one point is that it says basically, consider the techniques used by your favorite writers, ones that really impacted you, and borrow liberally. That does not mean plagiarize, but what styles did they use? What techniques did they use? And then if that worked, well, why not? Practice that. Now you're going to develop your own skills and have your own voice for sure, but there's nothing wrong with seeing how another artist creates something and then finding out those techniques and then being able to incorporate that into your own writing. So there is that. Let's move on. So there is the reading and resources. Woohoo! So again, some good stories here under crafting novels. And let's just look really quickly at the 5 elements of storytelling because there's something I wanted to touch on here. If you click on this, it downloads this particular thing over here. So this is the 5 elements of storytelling that it kind of brings up. And it talks about action, dialogue, description, inner monologue, and exposition narrative. Now, one thing we haven't talked about a lot in this class is the idea of description. Although this is huge when it comes to really making a story come alive. And, description is really what are the 5 senses experiencing, okay? Now, one thing that I see in beginning writers is they do either one or the other. They either have no description or they completely overdo it, okay? So it doesn't say all these things. Generally, what I've seen and what I've tried and whatever is pick particularly one particular sensory description that will relate to something that's going on. Let the reader's mind kind of fill out the rest, and it needs to connect to the story. So let's say someone walks into a room and there's a dead body, someone who's been murdered horribly. Well, maybe, just maybe, connect on the smells that come from entering such a thing and have that connect with the reader. Okay. So what sense would really make a compelling connection to what the character is experiencing? Something to think about. So anyway, there's more things that you can go ahead and read through this particular thing, but I just wanted to make sure we touched on description a little bit more. Let's move on to the next part of this module. And it says, before you get started, remember, okay, so I will have a video posted on writing techniques, and what I will do is I will actually kind of review how I've written one of my books, because I think, not that I'm trying to promote myself or whatever, but I think it's beneficial, like, well, hey, he's actually written books and had them published. Maybe, get right from the horse's mouth the techniques that he used. Now, again, it's going to be different from what other people use, but I thought that might be beneficial. So look for that in the announcement sections. All right, then let's get started. So for this week, we have the discussion for the writer. So the idea is choose a familiar story from one of your curated book list, and in your discussion, you're going to consider the following. So one of the books that you're reading this semester, okay? And then look, what craft elements were brought the story to life? What elements were used to engage the reader, keep the story moving? How can you use those elements in your own story? What did you notice about your peers and stuff like this? I will even take a spin on this, and maybe, let's say one of the books that you had to read this semester, you did not rather enjoy, okay? So a few of you have mentioned that, where you had to read a book, and you're like, I picked this book because I thought it'd be interesting. As I read it, I was like, ugh. Okay, well, why? Okay, what didn't bring the story to life? Okay, what didn't they do to engage the reader? Okay, something else to consider, a different spin you can do on it. How can you avoid those elements in your own story? Now, keep in mind, well, how can one person like the book and another person not like the book? Well, I think I got that right. One person likes it, one person doesn't like it. Again, everyone is different. They're going to have different things that they appeal to. Some people are going to be different audiences or whatever. And I would say that really, for you to become a successful writer is to emulate the things that you were interested in, okay? Meaning that if you found a certain type of book engaging and it brought it to life, then that's what you should emulate simply because it's going to be more interesting to the reader and more interesting to write if it's the kind of things that you enjoy. If you're trying to emulate someone in a style that you don't like, then it's going to be boring. You'll be bored writing it. People will be bored reading it. Again, it's an overgeneralization, but it's not that far from the truth. So go ahead and have some fun with this, as far as a strategy for the writer. To maybe look at the other side, okay? What to avoid, as well as things that we can do. So that's really the only assignment that we're doing for this week. However, a big however, don't tune out yet. As a final project reminder, it is due in next module, Module 9. The end of next module, you will be submitting your final project. We've been talking about this. We've been kind of doing some first drafts throughout the whole thing. So for this class, review. You don't have to submit anything, but I need you to review the final guidelines and the rubric of what you need to do. Now note, your final version will be in a Word document. So for Module 6, you had a chance to be a little more creative. Again, it says, remember that Module 6, you presented your outline in a creative way, and there was some excellent way that I saw students do this. There were some PowerPoints, there were some videos. Some people did a Word document, okay? But for the final version, okay, it has to be a Word document. Don't shoot the messenger. It just is what it is. All right. So if you have questions about the final project, please do this. Again, this is a big part of this class, and it's a big thing that will help you through the rest of your education here. So we want to make sure we put the time and effort into this. So that's what's going on for this week. Really, the only deliverable is the discussion board. Also to have something to do and something good to eat for Thanksgiving. I will go back to one concept real quick here at the end. The idea of when we deconstruct a story. I'm reminded of the really lame joke that, breaking down a joke and explaining the joke is kind of like killing a frog, or dissecting a frog rather. Why I ruined that, okay. Explaining a joke is like dissecting a frog. It can be done, but it usually dies in the process. That's the saying. So unfortunately, as we start to deconstruct some of our favorite stories, and we learn the different ways to do it, it's hard for many people, including myself, to go back and be able to read those stories just for sheer enjoyment because we know the tricks that the author is using. But it's still a good exercise to do. So that's it for week 8, or module 8. Yes. Again, so get the discussion done. Enjoy Thanksgiving, and we will catch you up with module 9 next.